Hello, these are flip notes 1.10, and they're the last section in the Unit 1 extension on the biological basis of behavior. And we're talking a little bit about dreaming and a lot more about drugs. Let's get to it.
So, dreams, we all know what dreams are. They're usually based on vivid imagery, have a story like quality, and we used to think that dreams only happen during REM sleep. But researchers now know that they happen in all stages of sleep, but we are most likely to remember the dreams that happen during REM sleep. And that's just because REM sleep is closer to when we're awake. And that's often when we wake up from our dreams, and the amygdala seems to be more active during REM sleep. And we know that the amygdala plays a role in heightened emotions, so that could be contributing to that vivid imagery. This diagram here is showing us for the stages of sleep, the dots show the frequency of the dreams. And really the only way to know if somebody was dreaming is to actually wake them up and ask them if they were dreaming. So people in some of these other stages would be woken up in a sleep lab and they could say that, yeah, they were pretty sure they were dreaming, but they often couldn't say what they were dreaming about. But you can see over here in the REM stage, a much bigger frequency of dreaming seems to occur. The content of our dreams, different theories on why we dream what we dream. Research shows that it's usually stuff that's familiar, things like falling, trying repeatedly and maybe frustratingly to do something, stuff about school. Freud said a lot of stuff from our waking life ends up into our dreams, and he called that stuff in the dreams day residue in the dream. Some other theories of why we dream. So again, dreams as wish fulfillment for Freud, that day residue kind of disguises as other things. The Cartwright problem-solving view says that dreaming is kind of a chance to relive things from the day and kind of resolve problems, kind of reenact conversations. And then the activation synthesis model says that really dreaming is just random neural firing across the cortex and that our consciousness is just trying to make sense out of it. So that's why they don't make sense usually, is because it's such random neural firing. Moving into the second part of this chapter, and it is about psychoactive drugs. So, really, this portion of the chapter is about altered states of consciousness. So, sleeping is an altered state, and so are the states that drugs can create, psychoactive drugs particularly. A psychoactive drug is any kind of chemical substance that can alter our perception or our mood, affect our consciousness. And they do that by working and interacting with neurotransmitters at the different sites, receptor sites of neurons. Drugs can act as an agonist or an antagonist. Remember that if they're an agonist, they are mimicking the effect of a neurotransmitter, that they are similar enough in structure to bind with the neuron and to mimic, and often it's a stronger effect than the original chemical. And then antagonists are going to block and have the opposite effect of the original neurotransmitter. Repeated exposure to any psychoactive drug can produce tolerance. When we have tolerance, the effect lessens over time. So you have to take more of the drug in order to get that same desired effect. Drug substance dependence technically means that the body has adapted to the drug. And that usually means that the body has also minimized or cut back on its own production of that neurotransmitter. Usually, that also means that when a person stops taking that substance, they're going to experience withdrawal symptoms. There are two types of dependence or addiction. There's physical dependence and then there's psychological. With physical, the brain has actually changed along with the dependence. And if they stop taking the drugs, they're going to experience uncomfortable physical withdrawal symptoms. With psychological, it's more of an emotional or motivational addiction. If they have withdrawal symptoms, they're not true physical ones that have changed the brain chemistry. It's more of a learned habit that makes them want the drug. But often that habit can be really strong, and the anxiety associated with it can make it feel like they're having withdrawal symptoms. Many of the ones that we will talk about today, including cocaine and opioids, even other ones like caffeine and nicotine, they create physical dependencies. Probably our best example of one that creates a psychological dependency is marijuana. Some symptoms, physical withdrawal symptoms, can include fatigue, headaches, tremors, sweating, vomiting, and other more intense ones. And then psychologically, dysphoria, which is the opposite of euphoria, you just kind of don't feel as happy. Depression, anxiety, agitation, and then anhedonia, reduced motivation to experience pleasure. Like they just feel like they can't be happy anymore. And a lot of these, light ones, lighter conditions can be even with things like caffeine, but especially with long-term drug use, all of these symptoms can become enhanced. We have three main categories that we're going to look at for types of drugs: depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. We call depressants depressants because they depress or minimize the activity of the central nervous system. And the main ones we'll look at are alcohol, barbiturates, and opiates. So alcohol in low doses can relax the sympathetic nervous system. So in some cases, alcohol is actually considered something that could be healthy in the sense that it can lower blood pressure and help a person to relax. But in higher doses, it affects reaction times, speech slurs, skilled performance, and we know that it affects the cerebellum, so that affects things like balance and posture when walking. Large amounts can also affect memory because it disrupts the process of memories being transferred from short term to long term memory, reduces self awareness, and affects inhibitions and decision making. Barbiturates are drugs that mimic the effects of alcohol, and they also depress the CNS. A lot of them are used as sleeping pills. Rohypnol, um, the street name for that is roofies, or the date rape drug, and it produces an amnesia type state. And this is the one that people always talk about, like don't ever leave a drink unattended or take a drink from a stranger because it's odorless and colorless. It's considered a depressant, but people often don't taste it or anything, and it has really dangerous effects. Opiates are our next depressant in this category. They come from the poppy plant and opium. Examples of some opiates: morphine and heroin. They depress neural activity, but they're also known for lessening pain. So when people are injured, they're at the hospital, they can be given morphine and it'll help block the pain, but it also tends to make them loopy and sleepy. Lessens anxiety, but they can become highly addictive. Heroin is another type of opiates. Heroin creates a strong high that can last for a few hours, but then it's highly addictive. They're craving another fix. They usually need larger and larger doses because of tolerance, and it has some pretty strong physical withdrawal symptoms. When people are coming off of heroin, when they're trying to kind of get in control of their addiction, sometimes they can be given methadone. With methadone, it doesn't quite give them a high, but it changes their feeling enough that it can reduce some of the physical cravings. But then people can be addicted to methadone. Our next category are stimulants. These are drugs that increase neural activity. They speed up body function. So often people start on these because they're tired and they need some kind of energy booster. But these are addictive and some can be really dangerous as well. Caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, ecstasy, amphetamines, and methamphetamines. We don't go into Adderall and Ritalin, but those are also in this category of stimulants. So caffeine, a lot of people don't think of caffeine as a drug, but it is considered the most widely used psychoactive drug because it does actually alter our brain, not as intensively as some of these other drugs that we'll talk about, but it does. It increases attentiveness, can improve the mood, but it does become physically addictive. And if you have drank lots of caffeine and then tried to stop, then you know some of these withdrawal symptoms, including things like headaches, being irritable, and drowsy. At high doses, caffeine can produce anxiety, restlessness, insomnia, increased heart rate, coffee nerves. The next one in this uppers category or stimulants are amphetamines, often called speed or uppers. One side effect of amphetamines is that they do suppress appetite. So with meth, a lot of people who are addicted to that, they just don't feel hungry as much. So kind of one of the symptoms or side effects that you see in people who are addicted to meth and other amphetamines is that they're real thin. And amphetamines were used to be prescribed as diet pills, but not anymore because people realized how dangerous they were and how addictive people became to them. Can help with concentration, reduce fatigue, but it can also cause them to be anxious and kind of real fidgety. Crystal meth, methamphetamines, is an illegal drug manufactured, so it is not like marijuana, like it comes from a plant. Meth has to be made, usually in a meth lab. As with all amphetamines, there's usually a crash, like so there's the high and then there's the crash, and that's when they experience the withdrawal symptoms. Highly addictive, irritability, insomnia, hypertension. Over time, it seems to reduce their baseline dopamine levels. So part of the physical dependency here is that the brain stops producing as much dopamine because the drug is present in the system. So then when they stop taking it, not only are they not getting the high from the drug, but their brain is also not producing any more natural dopamine as well. Meth mouth is a side effect of methamphetamines, and it's just really gross, bad deterioration of the teeth. I did a little bit of background research to try to figure out the causes of meth mouth, and a lot of it is that just that while people are in the high state, that they just really don't take care of their teeth. They tend to eat a lot more sugary stuff, and it's really really poor nutrition. So it's really just like lack of self care. Cocaine is another stimulant. When inhaled or snorted, it does reach the brain very quickly, producing the high or the euphoria. It can usually last 10 to 30 minutes if they're a binge user. Cocaine is highly addictive as well. Ecstasy, probably the question AP test that shows up fairly frequently is what is the real name or the drug name for ecstasy, and it is MDMA. You don't need to memorize what it stands for, but make sure that you know that MDMA is ecstasy. Ecstasy is both a stimulant and a mild hallucinogen. Probably you're more familiar with it as a club drug that people talk about it with raves and stuff. It can increase empathy and peacefulness. They feel calm and relaxed. They seem to have an unending supply of energy, but one of the dangers of ecstasy is that it's really, really dehydrating. And then people often engage in really physical activities, like they're dancing at a rave, and then they can often get overheated, and their increased blood pressure can be real dangerous. Researchers have found a decline in memory and performance on IQ tests in relation to regular use of MDMA. The other one I forgot to mention, long-term serotonin changes in the brain. And we know that serotonin can lift our mood. So when someone becomes addicted to MDMA and then they stop using it, then it's already altered their own serotonin levels. Hallucinogens can create a psychedelic effect that distorts perceptions, sensory images. The two examples we'll look at here are LSD and marijuana. LSD, extremely strong and dangerous. Um, One of the dangers is it really only takes small amounts to have an effect. One of the common forms is that it'll be kind of put into these sort of like stamps and then it dissolves on somebody's tongue. But one of the most powerful drugs known. So usually we think of LSD as considered just acid. So an acid trip can last for many hours, but one of the other kind of scary things about it is that the effects can vary greatly. Sometimes people have a good acid trip versus a bad acid trip with visual distortions, hallucinations, but they could also have scary hallucinations and puts them into a state of panic. Some people have even hurt themselves or died because they were in this panic state caused by an acid trip. One of the other side effects of LSD is that it can lead to flashbacks of the trip, days, weeks. Some people have even talked about it having the months, like many months later, having a flashback of the drug. And then marijuana produces a feeling of elation, relaxation, relieves inhibitions, relieves anxiety, and increases sensitivity to sight, sounds, and touch. THC is the active ingredient there, which can remain in the body for a while after using it. Some effects: impaired attention, slower reaction time, interferes with concentration, and then also messes with your ability to form memories. Um, because of that impaired attention and coordination in states that have legalized marijuana, they do also have all the same kind of rules about driving under the influence and working under the influence, the same way that we have laws everywhere about using alcohol and then being under the influence of alcohol while driving and operating machinery and all that kind of stuff. Chronic use of marijuana linked to lack of motivation and apathy and respiratory damage and other problems